The champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the marble floor. Not because I was clumsy. Not because I was startled. But because my ex-husband Derek had just grabbed the fabric of my dress at the shoulder seam and ripped it down to my waist in front of 200 wedding guests. The sound of tearing silk cut through the string quartet's music. Every head in the ballroom turned toward me. My cream-colored maternity dress, the only formal thing that fit my 7-month pregnant body, hung in tatters. I stood there, exposed in my slip, one hand instinctively covering my belly as if I could protect my baby from this nightmare. "How dare you wear white to my wedding?" Derek shouted, his face twisted with manufactured rage. "You're so desperate for attention that you try to upstage the bride on her special day?" His new wife Brittany stood beside him in her actual wedding dress, her hand covering her mouth in mock horror. But I saw it. That flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. This wasn't spontaneous anger. This was planned. My throat closed up. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't move. Camera phones appeared everywhere, recording my humiliation from every angle. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like poison. "Can you believe she wore white? So inappropriate. Poor Brittany having to deal with the ex-wife's drama." I wanted to scream that my dress was cream, not white. That it was one of 3 formal dresses I owned that still fit. That I hadn't wanted to come to this wedding at all, but Derek had insisted it would be good for our child to see their parents being civil. But my voice wouldn't work. My body wouldn't cooperate. Andrea, my best friend, appeared at my side with her jacket. She wrapped it around my shoulders and guided me toward the exit while Derek continued his performance. "This is exactly why we divorced," he announced to the room. Naomi always had to make everything about her. Even today, she couldn't let Brittany have her moment. The crowd murmured in agreement. These people, many of whom I'd known for years, worked with, shared meals with during my marriage, believed him instantly. They didn't question why a pregnant woman would deliberately cause a scene. They just accepted Derek's narrative. We made it to Andrea's car before I completely broke down. My hands shook so badly I couldn't fasten the seatbelt. She did it for me, then pulled out of the country club parking lot as fast as legally possible. "That was planned," Andrea said, her voice tight with fury. "Did you see how Brittany had her phone ready? She was recording before it even happened." I finally found my voice. Why would they do that? The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I gave him everything he wanted just to be done with it. I've left them alone. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Andrea's jaw was set in that determined way that meant she wasn't letting this go. "And Naomi? We're going to make them regret this." My phone started buzzing. Text messages poured in. I made the mistake of opening one. It was a link to a social media post. The video was already online. "Desperate ex-wife crashes wedding in white dress. Gets what she deserves." The caption made my stomach turn. The video had been edited to start right when Derek grabbed my dress, cutting out the 20 minutes before when I'd been sitting quietly at my assigned table, bothering no one. In the comments, strangers who knew nothing about me called me every cruel name imaginable. They celebrated my humiliation. They said I deserved it for being disrespectful. Some even made disgusting comments about my pregnancy. The video had 50,000 views. Then 100,000. By the time we reached my apartment, it had gone viral. 500,000 people watching the worst moment of my life on repeat. I spent that night on my bathroom floor, my pregnant belly pressed against the cold tile, crying until I had nothing left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's face twisted in fake anger. I heard the fabric tearing. Felt 200 pairs of eyes judging me. Around 3 in the morning, Andrea came in and sat beside me on the floor. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She just handed me a bottle of water and said, "Tomorrow we start fighting back." But I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like exactly what Derek had made me look like: pathetic, desperate, and broken. 7 months pregnant with his child, publicly humiliated at his wedding, and now a viral joke for the entire internet to mock. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "You looked so desperate tonight. Did you really think wearing that dress would make Derek want you back? He upgraded, sweetie. Accept it." It was from Brittany's phone. She'd sent it from her honeymoon suite. That's when I realized the truth. The invitation to the wedding wasn't about civility or co-parenting. It was a setup from the start. They wanted me there specifically to humiliate me. The dress ripping wasn't Derek losing his temper. It was the grand finale of a carefully planned performance. I looked down at my belly at the baby girl growing inside me. Derek's daughter. A child who would one day ask why her parents weren't together. What would I tell her? That her father publicly humiliated her mother while she was pregnant? That he chose cruelty over kindness? No, I wouldn't tell her that. Because I wasn't going to let this be my story's ending. I was going to change the narrative completely. I pulled myself up from the bathroom floor. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes red and swollen, face blotchy from crying, wearing a shirt stained with tears. But underneath all that, I saw something else. A spark of the woman I used to be before Derek convinced me I was nothing without him. Andrea, I called out, my voice steadier than it had been in hours. I need you to help me with something. She appeared in the doorway immediately. Anything. I need to know everything. About Derek, about Brittany, about what really happened to our business. Because something doesn't add up. The divorce settlement, the way he pushed me to take less than I deserved, his sudden ability to afford this lavish wedding when our company was supposedly struggling. Andrea nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You think he stole from you? I think he stole from both of us. From the company we built together. And I think that's why he wanted me humiliated tonight. Not because he's cruel, though he clearly is. But because he's covering something up. If I'm too broken and desperate to function, I won't look closely at the numbers. But you're a financial analyst, Andrea said with a growing smile. Looking closely at numbers is literally what you do best. For the first time since the dress ripped, I smiled back. Exactly. The video hit 2 million views by morning. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, messages, and calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Most wanted gossip. Some wanted to offer fake sympathy. A few wanted to tell me I deserved what happened. I turned off my phone and focused on what mattered, finding the truth. Andrea brought her laptop to my apartment, and we spread out at my dining table with 6 months' worth of financial records from Rivera Analytics, the consulting firm Derek and I had built together. I'd started the company 5 years ago, fresh out of graduate school with a talent for finding patterns in financial data that others missed. Derek joined a year later when we got married, handling business development while I focused on the analytical work. Look at this, I said, pointing to a series of transactions from 3 months before our divorce. These consulting fees were paid to a shell company I've never heard of. LuxTech Solutions. But we don't have any subcontractors by that name. Andrea leaned closer. How much? This one payment is $75,000. And there are 5 more just like it. I pulled up the company registration records I'd accessed through my professional database. LuxTech Solutions was registered 4 months before our separation. The listed owner is someone named Robert Chin. Robert Chin, Andrea repeated. That sounds familiar. I searched my email archives. Here. Robert Chin is Brittany's father. The pieces started clicking into place. Derek had been planning this for months. He'd created a fake consulting company under Brittany's father's name, then funneled Rivera Analytics money through it. While I was home working on actual client projects, he'd been systematically stealing from our business. That's not all, Andrea said, pulling up bank statements on her laptop. Remember when Derek insisted you had to be removed from the business accounts during the divorce? He said it was standard procedure to separate finances. And I was too exhausted to fight him on it. I just wanted the divorce to be over. Derek had made every conversation a battle, wearing me down until I agreed to things just to have peace. Well, according to these bank records from right before the divorce, Rivera Analytics had $340,000 in cash reserves. But in the settlement, Derek claimed the company was worth $150,000, and he bought out your 50% share for $75,000. The room spun. He stole nearly $200,000 from me. From both of you, Andrea corrected. The company was half yours. But he also stole from the business itself, which means he defrauded your clients too. If they find out their consulting fees were going to a shell company instead of actual analysis work, Rivera Analytics will lose every contract. I sat back, processing the magnitude of Derek's betrayal. This wasn't just about our marriage ending. This was criminal fraud. Embezzlement. And he'd set up the entire scheme while I was trusting him, while I was pregnant with his child, while I was too focused on trying to save our relationship to notice what he was really doing. My phone, still turned off, sat on the counter like a coiled snake. I knew what would happen when I turned it back on. More videos, more comments, more people telling me I was pathetic. But I also knew I needed to document everything before Derek realized I was investigating. We need a lawyer, I said. Not a divorce lawyer. A criminal attorney. Andrea was already typing on her phone. I know someone. Patricia Monroe. She handled a major embezzlement case last year. Got her client full restitution plus damages. Set up a meeting. I stood and walked to my home office, pulling out every file related to Rivera Analytics. I'm going to build a case so airtight that Derek won't be able to lie his way out of this one. Over the next 3 days I barely slept. Between bouts of morning sickness and the baby pressing on my bladder every hour, I compiled spreadsheets, transaction records, email threads, and client contracts. I cross-referenced every payment Rivera Analytics received with every service we actually provided. The discrepancies were staggering. Derek had billed clients for work that never happened. He'd created fake invoices for services from Lux Tech Solutions. He'd transferred money to offshore accounts disguised as business expenses. And he'd done it all with my signature on the corporate documents, forged so perfectly I almost didn't catch it. He made it look like you approved everything, Andrea said when I showed her the forged signatures. If this goes to court, he'll try to claim you were in on it. Except I have proof I wasn't. I pulled up my work logs showing every hour I'd spent on actual client projects during the time Derek was committing fraud. I was working 60-hour weeks doing real consulting while he was stealing. My time entries don't match with when these fake transactions occurred. And look, I zoomed in on one of the forged signatures. He copied my signature from our marriage license. See this flourish on the N? I stopped doing that 2 years ago after I developed carpal tunnel. Every real signature I made during this period is slightly different. Andrea hugged me. You're brilliant. You know that, right? I didn't feel brilliant. I felt tired and betrayed and enormous in my maternity clothes. But I also felt something I hadn't felt since Derek ripped my dress. Powerful. I had evidence. I had documentation. I had the truth. The meeting with Patricia Monroe was scheduled for Friday afternoon at her downtown office. Andrea drove me because my ankles were so swollen I could barely press the gas pedal. I wore my best maternity suit and carried a briefcase full of printed evidence. Patricia was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. Ms. Rivera, what happened to you at that wedding was assault. The video evidence alone would be enough to press charges. But what Derek did to your business is far more serious. We're looking at embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and possibly wire fraud if he used electronic transfers across state lines. I don't care about the dress, I said, which was partially true. I cared deeply about the humiliation, but I cared more about justice. I care about my business, about my future, about making sure my daughter doesn't grow up thinking her father can get away with stealing. Patricia nodded. Then we're going to do this properly. First, I'm filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all of Derek's assets. If he realizes you're investigating, he'll hide everything offshore where we can't reach it. Second, we're going to involve law enforcement. This isn't just a civil matter, these are crimes. What about Rivera Analytics? I asked. I built that company. Can I get it back? We'll petition the court to nullify the buyout since it was based on fraudulent financial statements. You'll need to prove the company was worth significantly more than Derek claimed, which your documentation does. We'll also argue that the entire divorce settlement should be revisited since he hid assets. Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in days. How long will this take? Months, possibly longer. Derek will fight. He'll hire expensive lawyers. He'll try to make you look unstable, especially after that viral video. Patricia's expression softened slightly. That's why we need to control the narrative. You need to show the world who you really are. Not the woman in the torn dress, but the brilliant financial analyst who built a successful company from nothing. I thought about the 2 million people who'd watched my humiliation. About the comments calling me desperate and pathetic. About Derek and Brittany celebrating their honeymoon while I sat in a lawyer's office planning my comeback. I'm ready, I said. Whatever it takes. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, it was the smile of a predator spotting prey. Good. Because we're about to make Derek Russo's life very complicated. Patricia hired a private investigator named Thomas Gray within 24 hours of our meeting. He was a former FBI forensic accountant who specialized in following money trails. When he arrived at my apartment to review the evidence, he brought 3 laptops and enough coffee to fuel an army. This is good work, Thomas said, scrolling through my spreadsheets. You've documented the obvious theft. Now I'm going to find where he hid everything. I sat on my couch with my feet elevated, doctor's orders to reduce the swelling, while Thomas set up his equipment on my dining table. Andrea had taken the day off work to be there, mostly. To make sure I didn't overdo it. At 7 months pregnant, my energy came in unpredictable waves. Some days I felt invincible. Other days walking to the mailbox exhausted me. Start with Lux Tech Solutions, I told Thomas. That's the shell company Derek created using Brittany's father's name. Thomas's fingers flew across the keyboard. Found it. Registered in Delaware, classic move for hiding ownership. But the banking information. He leaned closer to the screen. The actual account is in the Cayman Islands. Can you access it? Andrea asked. Not directly. But I can see the transaction patterns. Thomas pulled up a series of charts showing money flowing from Rivera Analytics to LuxTech, then from LuxTech to multiple offshore accounts. Your ex-husband was more sophisticated than most white-collar criminals. He used a layered approach. The money doesn't just go to one account. It gets split and redistributed through several entities. I watched the charts, my analyst brain automatically spotting the patterns. These transfers happen on the 15th of every month. That's when our major clients paid their invoices. Derek would skim 20 to 30% off each payment before depositing the rest into Rivera Analytics' legitimate accounts. Exactly, Thomas confirmed. And because you were focused on the actual consulting work, you didn't notice the discrepancies. You'd see the deposits that matched your invoices, but you wouldn't see that the clients had actually paid more. Andrea frowned. Wait. If the clients paid more than what Rivera Analytics recorded, wouldn't they notice? Wouldn't their accounting departments flag the discrepancies? Thomas nodded. That's the clever part. Derek created fake itemized invoices that matched what Rivera Analytics officially recorded. So from the client's perspective, everything looked normal. But the original invoices, the ones that actually got paid, were for higher amounts. He'd add bogus line items. Rush fees. Administrative costs. Consultation surcharges. Things that sound legitimate but were pure fiction. How much total? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Thomas calculated for a moment. Based on what I'm seeing so far, at least $400,000 over 18 months. Possibly more once I dig deeper into the older accounts. $400,000. While I was working 12-hour days, analyzing data for clients, building Rivera Analytics' reputation, Derek had been stealing nearly $500,000. And I'd been too trusting, too focused on trying to save our marriage, too naive to see what was happening. There's more, Thomas said, pulling up another screen. The offshore accounts aren't just in Derek's name. There are 3 different LLC registrations tied to these funds. One lists Derek as the owner. One lists Brittany. And one lists a Timothy Bradford. Who's Timothy Bradford? Andrea asked. I closed my eyes, thinking back through all of Derek's business associates. His college roommate. They stayed close after graduation. Timothy works in commercial real estate in Miami. Well, Timothy Bradford is now a very interesting person, Thomas said. Because according to these records, he's been receiving regular payments from one of these offshore accounts. $5,000 a month for the past 2 years. Hush money, Andrea said immediately. He knows something. Thomas nodded. That would be my guess. And if we can figure out what he knows, we might have another witness. The baby kicked hard against my ribs as if agreeing with the plan. I rubbed my belly absently, thinking about everything Thomas had uncovered. Derek hadn't just stolen from me, he'd built an entire criminal enterprise. He'd involved multiple people. He'd planned this for years, not months. What about the wedding? I asked. The dress, the video, all of that. It seemed so spontaneous, but now I'm wondering if that was planned too. Thomas pulled up social media on one of his laptops. Let me check something. He searched through Brittany's posts from the weeks leading up to the wedding. Look at this. 3 weeks before the wedding, she posted a poll asking her followers what they thought about ex-wives attending their ex-husbands' weddings. Most people said it was weird. A week later, she posted a story about how classy and mature she and Derek were being by inviting you for the sake of co-parenting. She was setting the narrative, Andrea said, making it seem like they were the bigger people, so when you showed up, everyone would already be predisposed to judge you. And this, Thomas said, pulling up another post. 2 days before the wedding, Derek posted a photo of the seating chart with a caption about how complicated it was to blend families. He tagged you in it, which meant all his followers saw your name and profile. I remembered that tag. I thought it was strange at the time but assumed Derek was trying to be nice. Now I realized he was making sure everyone knew I'd be there. He was building an audience for my humiliation. They planned the whole thing, I said quietly. From the invitation to the dress code to the moment Derek grabbed my dress. It was all orchestrated. Patricia arrived an hour later with a briefcase full of legal documents. She reviewed everything Thomas had found, occasionally making notes or asking questions. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Naomi, what Derek did to you goes beyond normal divorce nastiness. This is a coordinated campaign of harassment and fraud. The wedding incident was designed to destroy your credibility before you could discover the financial crimes. If you'd stayed broken and humiliated, you never would have looked at the company records closely enough to find the theft." "But I did look," I said. "I'm still looking." "Yes, you are." Patricia pulled out a document. "This is an emergency motion for asset freezing. I'm filing it tomorrow morning. Once the judge signs this, Derek won't be able to access any of the money he stole. Not the offshore accounts, not the Luxtech funds, nothing. He'll know I'm coming after him," I said. "Yes. And he'll retaliate. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the video with 2 million views. About the comments calling me every cruel name. About standing in that ballroom with my dress torn while 200 people stared at me. About Derek's smug face and Brittany's satisfied smirk. "I'm not just prepared," I said. "I'm counting on it. Because every time Derek tries to attack me now, he's going to create more evidence of his character. And when this goes to trial, that's going to matter." Patricia smiled that predatory smile again. "You're going to make an excellent witness." Over the next week, Thomas continued digging into Derek's finances while I worked on something else, rebuilding my professional reputation. I couldn't get Rivera Analytics back overnight, but I could start showing people that I was more than the woman in the viral video. I created a new consulting firm called Rivera Solutions. It was just me at first, working from my apartment with my laptop and phone. But I had something Derek never had: actual talent. I'd been the one doing the real work at Rivera Analytics while he was schmoozing clients and stealing money. Those clients had worked with me directly. They knew my skills. I started reaching out to former clients carefully. Not all of them. Some had bought into Derek's narrative completely. But the ones I'd worked with closely, the ones who'd seen my analysis save them millions in bad investments or help them identify profitable opportunities, those people remembered me. My first call was to Margaret Chin, the CFO of a regional manufacturing company. I'd helped her identify supply chain inefficiencies that saved her company $2 million last year. We'd developed a friendly professional relationship. She'd even sent a gift when she found out I was pregnant. "Naomi," Margaret said when she answered my call, "I've been worried about you. I saw that video. It was awful." "Thank you. I'm okay. But I'm calling because I wanted you to know that I'm no longer with Rivera Analytics. I've started my own firm, and I wanted to see if you'd be interested in working with me directly." There was a pause. I held my breath, wondering if I'd misread our relationship. "Actually," Margaret said slowly, "I'm glad you called. We've been having issues with Rivera Analytics lately. The reports Derek's been sending us don't match the quality of work we used to get. I suspected you were the one who'd been doing most of the analysis." I confirmed. "All of it, actually." "Then yes. Send me your contract terms. I'd much rather work with you than with Rivera Analytics." One client. That's all it took to give me hope. By the end of the week, I had 3 former Rivera Analytics clients who'd agreed to switch to my new firm. The contracts weren't huge, not yet, but they were legitimate work. Real income. Proof that I could succeed on my own. Derek found out fast. He always did when something threatened his control. My phone rang at 11 p.m. on Friday night. I almost didn't answer, but Andrea convinced me to let it go to voicemail. We listened together as Derek's voice filled my apartment, dripping with barely controlled rage. "You think you can steal my clients, Naomi? You signed a non-compete agreement. I'll sue you into the ground. You'll have nothing left. Nothing. And good luck raising that baby alone when I have full custody because you're clearly unstable." Andrea grabbed my hand. "Don't let him get to you. That's what he wants." But I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. Because Derek had just made a critical mistake. He'd threatened to take my baby. And that threat was now recorded evidence of harassment. I called Patricia immediately despite the late hour. She answered on the second ring, sounding wide awake. "Derek just left me a voicemail threatening to sue me and take custody of my baby. I'm sending you the recording now." Patricia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold and sharp. "That was very stupid of him. Threatening custody in connection with business competition shows vindictive intent. This helps our case significantly. Forward me that voicemail and don't respond to him. Let him think he's intimidating you." After I hung up, Andrea made us both chamomile tea. We sat on my couch, my feet propped up on her lap while she rubbed my swollen ankles. "You know what's funny?" Andrea said. "Derek thought destroying you at that wedding would make you disappear. Instead, he just made you angry enough to fight back harder." I sipped my tea, feeling my daughter move inside me. She'd been active all evening, as if she could sense the tension. "I'm not doing this just for me anymore. I'm doing it for her. I want her to grow up knowing that when someone tries to break you, you don't stay broken. You get up, you get evidence, and you win." "That's going to make a hell of a bedtime story," Andrea said with a grin. I laughed despite everything, because she was right. One day when my daughter was old enough, I would tell her this story. But I'd make sure it had the right ending first. The ending where her mother won. The asset freeze went through on Monday morning. Patricia called me at 8:15 a.m., sounding triumphant. Judge Morrison signed the emergency motion. All of Derek's accounts are frozen pending investigation. He can't access the offshore funds, the Luxtech accounts, or any assets connected to Rivera Analytics. He's also been issued a restraining order regarding you, no contact except through attorneys. I sat down on my couch, relief washing over me. How long will the freeze last? Until the criminal investigation is complete and the civil case is resolved. Could be months. During that time, Derek will have access only to basic living expenses from his personal accounts, the ones that weren't tied to the fraud. Everything else is locked down. After we hung up, I allowed myself 30 seconds of satisfaction. Then I got back to work. Because feeling good about Derek's suffering wasn't the goal. Building something better was. Rivera Solutions needed to be more than just 3 clients and a laptop. I needed office space, business insurance, professional accounting software, and eventually employees. But all of that required capital I didn't have. The $75,000 Derek had paid me in the settlement was gone. I'd spent it on legal fees, medical bills, and living expenses during the divorce. I did have one asset though, my reputation among people who actually knew my work. So I created a detailed business plan, highlighting my track record of successful analyses and client outcomes. Then I applied for a small business loan through a credit union that specialized in supporting women entrepreneurs. The loan officer, a woman named Diane Patterson, reviewed my application with interest. "Your projected revenue numbers are conservative, which is good. And your client retention rates from Rivera Analytics are impressive. But I have to ask, what happened with that company?" "The divorce." I'd known this question would come. I'd prepared for it. My ex-husband was skimming from the business. I discovered it after the divorce and I'm currently pursuing legal action to recover the stolen funds. Rivera Solutions is my fresh start, built on the same analytical skills that made Rivera Analytics successful, but without the fraud. Diane made notes. "And you're 7 months pregnant." 8 months next week, I corrected. "I'll be taking 6 weeks of maternity leave, but I've already arranged for contract coverage during that time. I have 3 confirmed clients with monthly retainer agreements. The business will continue generating revenue even while I'm out." She studied my business plan for a long moment. "I'm going to approve this, but with conditions. You'll need to provide monthly financial reports for the first year. And I want to see proof of your professional liability insurance before we release the funds." "Done," I said immediately. "Thank you." The loan, $30,000, came through within 2 weeks. It was enough to rent a small office space, purchase necessary software and equipment, and cover expenses for the first 6 months. I signed the lease on a modest suite in a business park near my apartment. 1 main office, a small conference room, and a reception area. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Andrea helped me set up the space during a weekend furniture shopping marathon. We bought sensible desks, comfortable chairs, and filing cabinets from a used office supply store. I splurged on one thing, a beautiful nameplate for the door that read, "Naomi Rivera, Financial Analyst and Consultant." "Look at you," Andrea said as we stood in the doorway surveying our work. "Business owner. Boss. Future mother. Badass." The baby kicked and I laughed. "She agrees with you." My phone buzzed. It was Thomas Gray with an update. "I found Timothy Bradford. He's willing to talk if we guarantee immunity. Says he has information about offshore accounts we haven't discovered yet." I called Patricia immediately. She arranged a meeting for the following Thursday at her office. Timothy would bring his attorney, we'd bring Thomas, and everyone would record everything. In the meantime, I focused on growing Rivera Solutions. My 4th client came from an unexpected source, a referral from Margaret Chin. She told her CFO network about my work, and a food distribution company reached out needing help with financial forecasting for a major expansion. The contract was worth $15,000 over 3 months. Real money. Sustainable income. Proof that I could build something successful on my own. I was working late at my new office on Wednesday night. Technically not supposed to be working late at all given my pregnancy, but the deadline was tight, when my door burst open. Derek stood in the hallway, his face red with rage. "You froze my accounts," he snarled. "You vindictive." "Mr. Russo," came a calm voice from behind him. 2 police officers appeared, one with her hand on her radio. "You're violating a restraining order. Step away from Ms. Rivera now." I'd installed a panic button connected to the local police station after Patricia recommended it. I hadn't expected to use it this soon, but apparently Derek was less stable than I'd realized. The officers escorted Derek out while he shouted threats about lawyers and lawsuits. One of the officers stayed behind to take my statement. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. "Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine. Just shaken." My hands trembled as I saved my work and shut down my computer. "He's my ex-husband. There's a restraining order in place. We're aware. We'll be filing a report, and the district attorney will likely want to charge him with violation of the order. You should expect to be contacted for testimony." After they left, I sat in my office with my hand on my belly talking to my daughter. "Your father is not a good man, baby girl. But I want you to know something important. You don't have to be like him. You get to choose who you become. And I'm going to make sure you grow up safe, loved, and strong enough to never let anyone treat you the way your father treated me." She kicked in response and I smiled through tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. Patricia filed an emergency motion to revoke Derek's visitation rights based on the restraining order violation. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I had the meeting with Timothy Bradford to prepare for. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. I dressed in my best maternity suit again and met Patricia and Thomas at her office. Timothy showed up with his attorney, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit who seemed eager to make a deal. "My client is willing to provide information about Derek Russo's financial crimes in exchange for full immunity from prosecution," Timothy's attorney began. Patricia nodded. "We'll need to hear what he has first. If the information is substantive and leads to prosecution, we can discuss immunity." Timothy was about my age with thinning hair and a guilty expression. He couldn't meet my eyes as he began speaking. "Derek approached me 2 years ago with what he called a business opportunity. He said he needed to move money offshore for tax purposes and needed someone to help set up the accounts. I was working in real estate, dealing with international investors regularly, so I had connections in the Cayman Islands and Panama." "What did he ask you to do?" Patricia prompted. "Set up shell companies. Create accounts. Help him transfer money without it being traced back to him directly. He paid me $5,000 a month to keep quiet about it." Timothy finally looked at me. "I didn't know he was stealing from you. I thought it was just standard tax avoidance. When I found out about the divorce and then saw that video from the wedding, I realized Derek wasn't who I thought he was." "How much money total?" Thomas asked. Timothy pulled out a folder. "Close to $600,000 over the past 2 years. Maybe more. I only handled part of it. He has other accounts I don't know about." $600,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was more than just our company assets. That was systemic, long-term theft. Derek had been planning his exit strategy for years, building a financial cushion while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to save our marriage and our business. "I can provide account numbers, transfer records, everything," Timothy continued. "I kept copies of everything because I was worried Derek might try to implicate me if he got caught. I wanted insurance." "Smart," Patricia said. "We'll take those records. And yes, we can discuss immunity if this leads to prosecution." After Timothy and his attorney left, Patricia looked at me with an expression I'd come to recognize. She'd found blood in the water and was circling. "With this evidence, we're not just talking about civil restitution anymore. The DA is going to want to prosecute. Derek is looking at serious prison time." "Good," I said without hesitation. That night, I sat in my apartment with a notebook, listing everything I needed to accomplish before the baby arrived. Finish the current consulting projects. Set up parenting leave coverage. Prepare the nursery. Pack a hospital bag. Testify against Derek if needed. The nursery was the one thing I'd been avoiding. I'd bought a crib and a dresser, but they sat unassembled in boxes. Looking at them made everything too real. I was going to be a single mother. My daughter would grow up without a father in her life because her father was a criminal who'd chosen greed over family. Andrea found me crying in the empty nursery room at midnight. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tissues and helped me to my feet. "Tomorrow," she said firmly, "we're assembling this furniture. And we're going to make this room beautiful. Because your daughter deserves to come home to something perfect, even if everything else is complicated." "What if I can't do this?" I asked. "What if I'm not strong enough to be a single mother and run a business and fight Derek in court all at the same time?" "You're already doing it," Andrea pointed out. "You've been doing it for months. You're just scared because it's almost time for her to be here, and that's real in a way nothing else has been." She was right. I'd been so focused on fighting Derek and building my business that I hadn't fully processed the reality of becoming a mother. In a few weeks, I'd be responsible for an entire human being. A daughter who would look to me for everything: food, safety, love, guidance. "What if I'm not enough?" I whispered. Andrea took my face in her hands and looked me dead in the eyes. "You are enough. You are so much more than enough. And that little girl is going to grow up knowing her mother is a fighter who never gave up, even when everything seemed impossible." I hugged her tightly, grateful beyond words that I had at least one person in my corner who believed in me unconditionally. The next day we assembled the crib together. Then the dresser. Then we painted the walls a soft lavender and hung cheerful prints of animals and flowers. I washed all the tiny baby clothes and organized them in drawers. I set up the changing table and stocked it with diapers and wipes. By the end of the weekend, the nursery was complete. It was the first space in my apartment that felt full of hope instead of sadness. I stood in the doorway, one hand on my belly, imagining bringing my daughter home to this room. "We're going to be okay," I told her. "I don't know exactly how yet, but we're going to build a good life. I promise." Rivera Solutions landed its fifth client on Monday, a tech startup needing financial modeling for investor presentations. The contract was worth $20,000 and would establish me in a new market sector. I celebrated by buying myself a decent ergonomic chair and a coffee maker for the office. Small victories. That's what I was learning to appreciate. Every client who chose me over Derek. Every dollar I earned honestly. Every day I showed up and did the work despite being exhausted and pregnant and terrified. Patricia called Wednesday afternoon with news about Derek's visitation hearing. The judge revoked all custody and visitation rights pending the criminal investigation. "Derek can't contact you or the baby until this is resolved. If he's convicted, he might never have parental rights." "That should feel like winning," I said. "So why do I feel sad?" "Because despite everything, you're grieving the family you thought you'd have. That's normal. It's okay to feel sad about what could have been, even while you're glad he can't hurt you anymore." After we hung up, I let myself cry for the last time about Derek and our failed marriage. I cried for the naive woman who'd trusted him. I cried for the future I'd imagined that would never exist. I cried for my daughter who would grow up with a criminal for a father. Then I washed my face, ate dinner, and opened my laptop to work on the tech startup's financial models. Because crying was necessary sometimes, but it didn't build the future. Only work did that. And I had a lot of work ahead of me. The tech startup presentation was a success. I'd created financial models showing 3 different growth scenarios: conservative, moderate, and aggressive, along with corresponding risk assessments and mitigation strategies. The founders were thrilled, and more importantly, their investors were impressed enough to commit $2 million in funding. "Naomi, you're a miracle worker," the CEO told me via video call. "Our previous financial consultant couldn't visualize the data like this. Do you have capacity for ongoing work? We'd like you on retainer." That made 6 clients. 6 companies paying Rivera Solutions for my expertise. My little one-woman firm was becoming sustainable, profitable, real. Derek found out about my success the same way he found out about everything, through the network of business contacts we'd once shared. What he didn't know was that several of those contacts were now reporting back to me about his unraveling professional life. Rivera Analytics was collapsing. Without my actual analytical work, Derek couldn't deliver the quality results clients expected. 3 major contracts had been terminated. 2 more were threatening lawsuits for substandard work. The company's reputation was disintegrating. "He's been trying to hire other analysts," Margaret Chin told me during one of our regular meetings. "But no one wants to work for him. Word got around about the fraud investigation. Plus, honestly, most talented analysts would rather work for themselves than for someone with Derek's reputation." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had spent years taking credit for my work, convincing himself and others that he was the brilliant one. Now, without me, he was being exposed as exactly what he'd always been: a mediocre businessman with good social skills and criminal ethics. But Derek's professional collapse wasn't my focus. The criminal investigation was moving forward, and I had to prepare for my role in it. The district attorney assigned to Derek's case was a woman named Lauren Foster. She was in her 40s, had prosecuted hundreds of white-collar crimes, and had a reputation for being thorough and relentless. Our first meeting was at her office downtown, with Patricia beside me and Thomas Gray providing technical support. Ms. Rivera, I've reviewed all the evidence you've compiled. It's some of the most comprehensive documentation I've seen in an embezzlement case. You've essentially done half of our investigative work already. Lauren smiled. Are you sure you don't want to go to law school? I'll stick with numbers, I said, shifting in my chair. 8.5 months pregnant made sitting for long periods uncomfortable. They make more sense than people. Lauren pulled up a presentation on her laptop. Here's where we are. We have evidence of embezzlement totaling approximately $650,000 from Rivera Analytics. We have wire fraud charges for the interstate and international transfers. We have forgery charges for the fake signatures. And thanks to Timothy Bradford's cooperation, we have money laundering charges for the offshore accounts. What about the wedding incident? Patricia asked. The assault. That's trickier. Technically, yes, ripping someone's dress is assault. But Derek's attorney will argue it was a spontaneous emotional reaction, not premeditated. And given the viral video, there's a PR component we need to consider. Some people will see Derek as the victim of an angry ex-wife trying to ruin his life. Even though he's the one who committed fraud? I asked incredulously. Unfortunately, yes. The court of public opinion doesn't always align with actual justice. Which is why we're going to focus on the financial crimes. Those are clear-cut. The evidence is irrefutable. And when Derek is convicted, and he will be convicted, the wedding assault will be seen in its proper context as part of a pattern of abusive behavior. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out. That timeline meant I'd have my baby long before facing Derek in court. Part of me was relieved. I didn't want to be waddling into a courtroom 9 months pregnant. But part of me wanted this over immediately, wanted vindication and justice without more waiting. In the meantime, Lauren continued, expect Derek to try to discredit you. He'll leak stories about you being unstable, vengeful, a liar. He'll try to paint himself as the victim of a vindictive ex. Don't engage. Don't respond. Let his own actions speak for themselves. She was right. Within a week, anonymous posts appeared on social media claiming I'd fabricated the evidence, that I was trying to frame Derek because I couldn't handle the divorce, that I was an unfit mother who should have custody rights revoked. The posts were crude and obviously desperate, but they still hurt. Especially the ones attacking my fitness as a mother. I hadn't even given birth yet, and strangers were declaring me incompetent. Andrea found me reading the comments one night, tears streaming down my face. She took my phone away and made me hot chocolate. Those aren't real people with real opinions, she said firmly. Those are Derek's hired trolls or his desperate friends. Anyone who actually knows you knows you're going to be an amazing mother. But what if they're right? I asked. What if I can't handle being a single mother and running a business? What if I'm setting myself up to fail at both? Then you'd be like literally every other working parent who worries about balance, Andrea pointed out. But you're not going to fail. You're too stubborn. I laughed despite myself. Stubborn is your word for determined? Stubborn is my word for you refusing to give up even when things are hard. Which is exactly what your daughter is going to need from you. The baby kicked hard as if agreeing with Andrea. I was running out of time to prepare. My due date was 3 weeks away. I'd arranged for 2 contract analysts to cover my clients during maternity leave. I'd stocked my apartment with everything a newborn could possibly need. I'd practice breathing exercises and read every parenting book I could find. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It started with Brittany. Derek's new wife, who I'd barely thought about since the investigation started, posted a long statement on social media. It went viral within hours. I need to speak my truth about Derek Russo. When I married him 6 months ago, I believed I was marrying a successful businessman who loved me. Instead, I married a fraud who used me and my family to hide his crimes. I've learned that Derek created shell companies using my father's name without his knowledge. He forged signatures. He lied about his finances during our prenuptial negotiations, which means our marriage contract is void. But more than that, I've learned that the woman I helped him humiliate at our wedding, Naomi Rivera, was telling the truth all along. Derek isn't a victim. He's an abuser. And I'm getting as far away from him as possible. To Naomi, I'm sorry. I believed his lies about you and I participated in hurting you. There's no excuse for what we did at the wedding. You didn't deserve that. No one deserves that. I hope you and your baby are safe and happy, because that's more than Derek will ever give anyone. I read Brittany's post 3 times, not quite believing it. Patricia called immediately. Have you seen it? Just now. Is this real? Is she serious? Very real. My paralegal reached out to her attorney. Brittany is filing for annulment on the grounds of fraud. She's also cooperating with the criminal investigation. Apparently, she found more evidence of Derek's crimes in their shared accounts that he didn't know she had access to. Why would she do this? I asked. She hates me. She helped him destroy me at their wedding. Because Derek lied to her too, Patricia explained. He told her the business was worth millions, that they'd have a luxurious lifestyle. Instead, she married a man whose assets are frozen and who's facing prison time. She's protecting herself. But also, reading between the lines of her statement, I think she genuinely feels guilty about the wedding. Brittany's post changed the narrative entirely. Suddenly, the viral video of my humiliation was being recontextualized. News outlets picked up the story. Groom who ripped pregnant ex-wife's dress facing fraud charges. Bride apologizes after discovering husband's crimes. Viral wedding humiliation reveals larger abuse pattern. People who'd mocked me in the comments 6 months ago were now apologizing. Strangers sent messages of support. 3 different news shows requested interviews. I declined them all. I wasn't interested in being part of Derek's media circus. I just wanted justice and peace. But the vindication felt good. Felt really good. My water broke at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before my due date. Andrea rushed me to the hospital while I tried to remember everything from the birthing classes I'd taken. Labor was long and exhausting and painful in ways no book adequately described. But at 4:47 p.m., after 14 hours of work, my daughter entered the world screaming with impressive lung capacity. She's perfect, the nurse said, placing her on my chest. Congratulations, Mom. I looked down at this tiny, furious human I'd created, and everything else disappeared. Derek, the trial, the business, none of it mattered in that moment. Only her. Only Zoe Marie Rivera, 7 pounds 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her mother's determined expression. Andrea took photos while I cried happy tears and whispered promises to my daughter. Promises to keep her safe. To teach her to be strong. To show her that she could build a good life even when things seemed impossible. Derek tried to show up at the hospital that evening. Hospital security turned him away based on the restraining order. He left angry voicemails on Patricia's phone demanding parental rights. She forwarded them all to Lauren Foster as additional evidence of harassment. I spent 3 days in the hospital recovering while Zoe learned to nurse and sleep and exist in the world. Andrea brought me real food, the hospital meals were terrible, and helped me figure out how to change diapers one-handed while supporting a newborn. You're a natural, Andrea said, watching me swaddle Zoe with competent movements. I'm terrified, I admitted. What if I mess this up? You won't. And if you do make mistakes, you'll figure it out. That's what good parents do. They try their best and adjust when needed. Bringing Zoe home to our apartment was surreal. The nursery I'd prepared looked exactly right with her sleeping in the crib. The bottles I'd sanitized got used for late-night feedings. The baby clothes I'd washed fit her perfectly. I was exhausted beyond anything I'd experienced. Zoe woke every 2 hours to eat. I lived in a fog of sleeplessness and hormones and overwhelming love. But I was also happier than I'd been in years. Rivera Solutions continued operating during my maternity leave, managed by the contract analysts I'd hired. They sent me weekly updates. Every client was satisfied, no major issues, revenue stayed consistent. I'd built something that could function without me being present every moment. 6 weeks after Zoe was born, I returned to work part-time. Andrea agreed to be Zoe's daycare provider 3 days a week, which meant I could work knowing my daughter was with someone I trusted completely. The trial date approached. Lauren Foster kept me updated on developments. Derek had hired an expensive defense attorney who was trying every delay tactic imaginable. But the evidence was overwhelming. Timothy Bradford's testimony was devastating. Brittany's cooperation filled in gaps we hadn't even known existed. Derek's attorney approached me about a plea deal, Lauren told me during one of our prep sessions. He's willing to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. What are you recommending? I asked, bouncing Zoe gently. She'd fallen asleep during the meeting, her small hand curled against my chest. I think we reject it. We have enough evidence to convict on all charges. Derek deserves the full consequences of what he did. But ultimately it's your decision. You're the victim here. I looked at my sleeping daughter and thought about the future I wanted for her. No plea deal. Derek needs to be held fully accountable. Not just for what he did to me but for what he might do to others if he gets away with a slap on the wrist. Lauren smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The trial was set to begin in 3 months. In the meantime, I had a business to grow and a daughter to raise. Derek's crimes had tried to destroy me, but instead, they'd forged me into someone stronger than I'd ever been before. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who didn't need validation from others. Someone who could build an empire from nothing but determination and skill. Derek had wanted to humiliate me into irrelevance. Instead, he'd given me the motivation to become unstoppable. Zoe was 2 months old when I realized something profound. I was actually good at being a mother. Not perfect, not without mistakes, but genuinely competent in ways I hadn't expected. She was an easy baby as far as babies went. She slept in 3-hour stretches, nursed without difficulty, and seemed content to observe the world with wide, curious eyes. When she cried, it was for specific reasons: hungry, tired, needing a diaper change, and I learned to interpret her different sounds. "You're a natural," Andrea said for the 100th time, watching me multitask between feeding Zoe and reviewing a client's financial report on my laptop. "I'm just figuring it out as I go," I said. But secretly I was proud. I'd been terrified of motherhood, convinced I'd fail spectacularly. Instead, I discovered reserves of patience and capability I didn't know I possessed. Rivera Solutions was thriving. The contract analysts I'd hired during maternity leave had done such good work that I offered them permanent positions. Suddenly, my one-woman firm had 3 employees. We needed bigger office space. I found a suite on the 2nd floor of a renovated building downtown. It had space for 5 desks, a proper conference room, a small kitchen, and, most importantly, a private office where I could pump breast milk or bring Zoe if needed. The lease was ambitious for a company less than a year old, but my revenue projections supported it. "You're building something real," Patricia observed during a meeting to discuss trial preparation. Zoe was sleeping in her carrier next to my chair, completely oblivious to the legal proceedings being planned around her. "I'm building what Derek should have built if he'd been honest," I corrected. "Rivera Analytics could have been successful without fraud. All he had to do was pay me fairly and do legitimate work. Instead, he got greedy." The trial was now 6 weeks away. Lauren Foster had sent me a thick binder of materials to review. My testimony would be crucial. I needed to be prepared to explain the financial evidence in terms a jury could understand, to remain calm under cross-examination, to present as credible and sympathetic. "Derek's attorney is going to try to paint you as vindictive," Lauren warned. "He'll bring up the viral video, suggest you're a spurned ex-wife seeking revenge. You need to stay calm and factual. Let the evidence speak for itself." I practiced my testimony with Patricia, going over every question a defense attorney might ask. The work was tedious but necessary. This trial would determine not just Derek's legal fate, but also my financial future. If I won the civil case alongside the criminal conviction, I'd recover everything Derek stole plus damages. That money would mean everything to Zoe's future: college fund, stable housing, opportunities one wanted her to have. One evening, while Zoe was sleeping and I was reviewing trial materials, my phone rang. A known number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Naomi Rivera?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes. My name is Jennifer Park. I'm a reporter with Business Weekly magazine. I'm working on a story about women entrepreneurs overcoming adversity, and your name came up repeatedly in my research. Would you be interested in an interview?" I hesitated. I'd avoided media attention since the wedding video went viral. But this was different. This was about business success, not personal drama. "What angle are you taking with the story?" I asked. "I want to profile women who've built successful businesses after major life challenges. Divorce, health crises, financial setbacks. How they turned adversity into opportunity. Your story of building Rivera Solutions after discovering fraud in your previous company is compelling. But I want to focus on your business acumen, not your personal life. Can I think about it?" "Of course. I'll email you some sample articles I've written so you can see my style." No pressure. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment, listening to Zoe's soft breathing through the baby monitor. A year ago, I'd been at Derek's wedding getting humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Now, a business magazine wanted to interview me about my success. The transformation still felt surreal sometimes. I emailed Jennifer Park the next day and agreed to the interview. We scheduled it for 2 weeks out, after the trial would be concluded. I didn't want to discuss ongoing legal proceedings, but I was willing to talk about building a business as a single mother while facing professional and personal challenges. The trial began on a Monday morning in October. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing building with marble columns and high ceilings. I wore a navy suit and minimal jewelry, aiming for professional credibility. Andrea came with me for moral support, having arranged childcare for Zoe through another friend. Derek sat at the defense table with his attorney, a slick-looking man named Richard Caldwell who'd made his reputation defending white-collar criminals. Derek looked thinner than I remembered, his face drawn and older. He didn't look at me when I entered the courtroom. Jury selection took 2 days. The prosecution and defense questioned dozens of potential jurors, looking for people who could be fair but also people who'd be sympathetic to their respective sides. I sat in the gallery and watched, taking mental notes about which jurors seemed engaged and which seemed skeptical. The actual trial began on Wednesday with opening statements. Lauren Foster was masterful, laying out the timeline of Derek's crimes with devastating clarity. She used charts and graphs, my charts and graphs, the ones I'd created from months of investigation, to show the systematic nature of the theft. Derek Russo didn't make a mistake, Lauren told the jury. He didn't have a momentary lapse in judgment. Over 2 years, he deliberately, methodically, and repeatedly stole from his business partner, his wife, and his clients. He created fake companies. He forged signatures. He moved money offshore to hide it. And when his ex-wife discovered his crimes, he tried to destroy her credibility by publicly humiliating her while she was 7 months pregnant with his child. This is not a case about a complicated divorce. This is a case about fraud, theft, and a man who believed he was too smart to get caught. Richard Caldwell's opening statement tried to paint Derek as a businessman making legitimate financial decisions that his bitter ex-wife misunderstood. It was a weak argument, and I could see several jurors looked skeptical. I was called to testify on Thursday afternoon. I'd prepared extensively, but walking to the witness stand still made my hands shake. I placed my right hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then sat down and faced the courtroom. Lauren Foster led me through my testimony methodically. We covered my educational background, master's degree in financial analysis, my work history, 5 years building Rivera Analytics from nothing, my marriage to Derek and his role in the company, the discovery of the fraud, the documentation I'd compiled. Ms. Rivera, can you explain to the jury how you discovered the embezzlement? Lauren asked. I took a breath and spoke clearly. I was 7 months pregnant when I attended Derek's wedding to his new wife, Brittany. During the reception, Derek publicly ripped my dress and claimed I was trying to upstage the bride. The incident was recorded and posted online. It went viral and I was humiliated in front of millions of people. How is that relevant to discovering the fraud? The humiliation was so extreme and so public that it made me question Derek's motives. Why would he invite me to his wedding just to destroy me? That's when I started looking at our business records more carefully. I realized that during our divorce, Derek had undervalued Rivera Analytics significantly. He'd claimed the company was worth $150,000 when it actually had $340,000 in cash reserves. The numbers didn't make sense unless he'd been hiding assets. Lauren had me walk the jury through the specific transactions, the forged signatures, the shell companies. I used simple language and clear examples, remembering Lauren's advice to make the technical details understandable. You have a master's degree in financial analysis, Lauren said. How confident are you in your assessment that these transactions were fraudulent? Completely confident. I've been analyzing financial data professionally for 7 years. I've identified fraud and irregularities for dozens of clients. These transactions show every red flag of embezzlement: irregular amounts, unusual timing, fake documentation, hidden accounts. There's no legitimate business explanation for what Derek did. Richard Caldwell's cross-examination was aggressive, just as Lauren had predicted. He tried to suggest I was motivated by revenge, that I'd fabricated evidence, that I didn't understand the complexity of business finance. Ms. Rivera, isn't it true that you were angry about your divorce? He asked. I was sad about my divorce, I corrected. I'd spent 5 years building a life and a business with someone I thought I could trust. Discovering that trust was misplaced is sad, not angry. But you were angry enough to pursue criminal charges against your ex-husband? I pursued criminal charges because I discovered crimes. My emotional state is irrelevant. The evidence speaks for itself. You claim Mr. Russo forged your signature on various documents. How can you be certain those weren't legitimate signatures? I'd prepared for this question. I can demonstrate the difference between my actual signature during that time period and the forged versions. I developed carpal tunnel syndrome 2 years ago, which changed my signature slightly. The forged signatures match my older signature style from before the injury, which proves they were copied from earlier documents rather than signed by me contemporarily. I saw a couple jurors nodding. They understood. Caldwell tried several more angles, but I remained calm and factual, just as Patricia and Lauren had coached me. I didn't get defensive. I didn't show anger. I just presented the truth clearly and let the evidence do the work. After 2 hours of testimony, I was finally excused. I walked back to my seat on shaking legs while Andrea squeezed my hand. "You were perfect," she whispered. "Professional, clear, credible." The jury believed every word. The trial continued for another week. Timothy Bradford testified about setting up the offshore accounts. Brittany testified about discovering the fraud after their wedding. Multiple financial experts confirmed my analysis was accurate. Client representatives testified about being overcharged for work that was never completed. Derek never took the stand. His attorney decided the risk was too great. Lauren would have destroyed him on cross-examination. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, I was back in the gallery with Andrea, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. "On the charge of embezzlement, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of wire fraud?" "Guilty." "On the charge of forgery?" "Guilty." Every charge came back guilty. All 15 counts. Derek's face went pale. His attorney looked grim. Lauren Foster smiled professionally. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Derek remained free on bail until then, but with electronic monitoring and strict conditions. I walked out of the courthouse into bright October sunshine. Andrea hugged me tightly while I cried tears of relief and vindication. "You won," she said. "You actually won." "We won," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." My phone rang. It was Patricia. "Naomi, that was beautiful. Now we move forward with the civil case. Derek has been convicted of fraud, which means the burden of proof for recovering your money is much lower. We're going to get every penny back, plus damages, plus legal fees." That evening, I sat in Zoe's nursery, feeding her and telling her about the day even though she was too young to understand. "Your father was found guilty today," I said softly. "It should feel like a big victory, but mostly I just feel tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being angry, tired of letting him take up space in my life. The good news is this is almost over. Soon we can just focus on building our life without him shadowing everything." Zoe looked up at me with wide eyes, milk-drunk and content. She didn't care about trials or fraud or vindication. She just cared that she was fed and warm and loved. Maybe that was the real victory, not the guilty verdict, but the fact that I'd created a life where my daughter would never doubt she was loved and protected. Derek's sentencing hearing was on a gray November morning. The courtroom was less crowded this time, just the necessary parties, some reporters, and a few people from Derek's life who still supported him. Judge Patricia Morrison had a reputation for being tough on white-collar crime. She'd reviewed all the evidence, read the victim impact statements, and listened to arguments from both sides. "Mr. Russo, you have been convicted of 15 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. These were not crimes of passion or desperation. These were calculated, systematic thefts from your business partner, your wife, and your clients over a period of 2 years. You showed no remorse, even attempting to destroy Ms. Rivera's credibility through public humiliation when she discovered your crimes." Derek stood silently, his face carefully blank. "I'm sentencing you to 7 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 4 years if you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to Ms. Rivera in the amount of $650,000, plus damages of $200,000, plus legal fees. Additionally, you are barred from serving as an officer or director of any company for 10 years following your release." 7 years. The words hung in the air like thunder. Derek's shoulders slumped. His mother, sitting in the gallery, started crying. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just exhaustion. This chapter was finally closing. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted statements. I gave a brief one, carefully worded to be professional rather than vengeful. "I'm grateful that justice was served. My focus now is on my daughter and my business. I hope this case demonstrates that fraud has real consequences, and that victims of financial crime should never be afraid to come forward." That night, I turned off my phone and spent the evening playing with Zoe. She was learning to laugh, these big belly laughs that made everything else seem insignificant. I tickled her feet and made silly faces until she laughed so hard she got hiccups. This was victory. Not a prison sentence, but a happy baby and a peaceful evening. Not revenge, but the freedom to build something better. Derek would spend the next few years in prison. But I would spend them building a business, raising my daughter, and proving that the best response to someone trying to destroy you is to create something they could never imagine. The civil trial for asset recovery began 2 months after Derek's criminal sentencing. With a criminal conviction already on record, this proceeding was more straightforward. The focus was on calculating damages and determining how much Derek owed me. Zoe was 4 months old now, sleeping longer stretches at night and developing a personality. She smiled at everyone, grabbed at anything colorful, and made this amazing cooing sound when she was happy. I'd learned to work around her schedule, taking client calls during her naps and bringing her to the office when needed. My employees, I had 5 now, were incredibly supportive. They'd helped cover workload when I needed to be in court, and they treated Zoe like a beloved office mascot on the days I brought her in. Patricia handled the civil case with the same precision she'd brought to the criminal proceedings. The courtroom was familiar now. I knew which chair would be most comfortable during long testimony sessions, which water fountain had the coldest water, which bailiff was friendliest. This should be straightforward, Patricia told me before we entered the courtroom. Derek has already been convicted of stealing $650,000. We're asking for full restitution plus $200,000 in damages for the business opportunities you lost while dealing with his fraud, plus the cost of rebuilding your reputation after the wedding incident. What are the chances we get everything? I asked. Good. The judge in this case is business-focused. She understands that Derek didn't just steal money, he stole your time, your opportunities, and your professional credibility. That has monetary value. Derek looked worse than he had at sentencing. Prison was clearly not agreeing with him. He wore an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, transported from the federal facility where he was serving his sentence. His attorney for this case was different, court-appointed since Derek had burned through his money fighting the criminal charges. The proceedings took 3 days. Patricia presented evidence of Rivera Analytics' true value at the time of our divorce, documentation of the stolen funds, and testimony from business experts about the professional damage Derek's actions had caused. One expert witness, Dr. Elizabeth Montgomery, was particularly effective. She was an economist who specialized in calculating damages in fraud cases. Ms. Rivera lost more than just the stolen $650,000, Dr. Montgomery testified. She lost 18 months of prime earning years while dealing with divorce, pregnancy, and the investigation. During that time, she could have been building her business, taking on additional clients and establishing her reputation. Instead, she was fighting to recover what was already hers. Conservative estimates put that opportunity cost at $180,000. Additionally, the viral video from the wedding damaged her professional reputation in quantifiable ways. Several potential clients declined to work with her specifically because of that incident. That's another $75,000 in lost contracts. The defense attorney tried to argue that I'd actually benefited from the situation. After all, Rivera Solutions was now successful. Patricia destroyed that argument quickly. The fact that Ms. Rivera rebuilt her life after Derek Russo tried to destroy it doesn't erase his liability. If someone burns down your house and you build a new one, they still owe you for the original house. Ms. Rivera's success is a testament to her resilience, not an excuse for Mr. Russo's crimes. The judge agreed. Her ruling came down the following week. Derek owed me $650,000 in restitution for the stolen funds, $255,000 in damages for lost opportunities, and $147,000 in legal fees. Total, $1,052,000. It was more money than I'd expected. More than I'd dreamed of recovering. The judge had sent a clear message. Fraud has consequences that go beyond just returning what was stolen. Of course, actually collecting that money would be complicated. Derek was in prison with no income. His assets were minimal. The offshore accounts had been seized, Rivera Analytics had been dissolved, and he'd spent most of his remaining money on legal defense. We'll get it eventually, Patricia assured me. The court can garnish any future earnings he has. If he inherits money, we get paid first. If he gets a book deal about his crimes, and criminals often do, we get a percentage. This judgment doesn't expire. He owes you this money for the rest of his life. The knowledge was satisfying even if the money wasn't immediately available. Derek would never be free of what he owed me. Every dollar he earned for decades would be partially mine. It was a kind of justice that felt appropriate. Meanwhile, Rivera Solutions continued growing. My biggest client, a regional healthcare system, signed a 3-year contract worth $500,000 total. They needed comprehensive financial analysis for a major expansion project. It was exactly the kind of high-profile, complex work I dreamed of landing when I started the business. "You're going to need to hire more people," Andrea pointed out after I told her about the contract. "You can't handle this workload with just 5 employees." She was right. I spent a week interviewing candidates and hired 3 more analysts, including one senior-level person with 15 years of experience who'd been laid off from a larger firm. Suddenly, Rivera Solutions had 8 employees, and I'd moved from being a solo consultant to managing a real team. The office dynamics changed. I had to think about management structure, professional development, fair compensation. I had to delegate work effectively instead of trying to do everything myself. It was challenging but exhilarating. One afternoon in January, Jennifer Park from Business Weekly came to interview me as promised. I'd moved the interview several times due to the trial schedule, but now everything was settled enough to focus on it. Jennifer arrived at my office with a photographer, prepared to spend several hours getting the full story. We talked in my office while Zoe napped in her carrier nearby. "Tell me about the moment you decided to start Rivera Solutions," Jennifer began. I thought back to that night on my bathroom floor, crying after the wedding humiliation, deciding to fight back. I realized that staying broken was what my ex-husband wanted. The dress-ripping incident was designed to destroy my credibility before I could discover his fraud. But I refused to let his plan work. I started investigating, found the evidence, and realized I could either fight to get Rivera Analytics back or build something new and better. I chose to build. That must have been terrifying. You were pregnant, dealing with a divorce, facing a man who'd stolen from you. What made you think you could succeed? Honestly, I didn't know if I could. But I knew I was good at my actual work. Derek had been taking credit for my analysis for years, but the skills were mine. I'd built Rivera Analytics' reputation through my work, not his. So I bet on myself. I reached out to clients who knew my capabilities and they took a chance on me. Jennifer took notes. "How did you balance building a business with being a new mother?" "Not easily," I admitted. The first few months were brutal. But I had support. My best friend Andrea, my employees who stepped up, clients who were understanding when I needed to bring my daughter to meetings. And honestly, becoming a mother made me more determined. I wanted to build something that would provide for Zoe's future and show her that women can create successful careers even after major setbacks. The interview lasted 3 hours. Jennifer asked thoughtful questions about business strategy, financial management, client acquisition, and work-life balance. She barely mentioned Derek except in the context of what I'd overcome. The focus was on my success, not his crimes. The photographer took pictures of me in my office, reviewing financial reports, meeting with my team, and, at my request, one photo of me working while Zoe slept peacefully in her carrier. That photo felt important. It showed the reality of my life, professional and capable but also a mother with all the complexity that entailed. The article came out 6 weeks later. The headline read, "From Viral Humiliation to CEO, How Naomi Rivera Built an Empire After Fraud and Betrayal." It was a 5-page feature with multiple photos. Jennifer had captured my story perfectly, not as a revenge narrative, but as one of resilience and business acumen. She detailed the fraud Derek committed but spent more time on how I'd built Rivera Solutions, the smart decisions I'd made, the risks I'd taken, and the success I'd achieved. The response was overwhelming. I got emails from women entrepreneurs across the country sharing their own stories of rebuilding after betrayal. 3 different business schools requested permission to use my case as a teaching example. 5 major companies reached out asking about consulting services. Most surprisingly, I got a call from a venture capital firm specializing in women-owned businesses. They wanted to discuss investment opportunities. Did I have expansion plans for Rivera Solutions? The truth was, I hadn't thought much about major expansion. I'd been focused on surviving, then on stability, then on modest growth. But why not bigger ambitions? I scheduled a meeting with the VC firm for the following month. In the meantime, I worked with my team to develop a 5-year strategic plan. What could Rivera Solutions become with proper capital investment? We could expand into new markets. Healthcare was profitable, but so were technology, manufacturing, real estate. We could develop proprietary analytical software instead of using generic tools. We could establish offices in multiple cities. The possibilities felt endless. A year ago, I'd been crying on a bathroom floor, humiliated and broken. Now, I was planning business expansion with venture capital backing. Zoe turned 6 months old and we celebrated with a small party, just Andrea, a few colleagues, and Zoe gleefully smashing a cupcake into her face. I took photos and posted one to social media with a simple caption, 6 months of being this amazing human's mom. Best job ever. The post got more engagement than any business update I'd ever shared. People loved seeing the personal side, the reminder that success doesn't mean choosing between career and family. It means building a life that includes both. Derek remained in prison, quietly serving his sentence. I occasionally got updates through Patricia. He was working in the prison library, keeping his head down, avoiding trouble. His early parole hearing would be in 3 years. Part of me hoped he was genuinely changing. Not for his sake, but for Zoe's. She'd eventually want to know about her father, and I hoped I could honestly tell her that he'd learned from his mistakes and become a better person. But that was his journey to make, not mine to worry about. My journey was about continuing to build the business, my life, my daughter's future. Every client contract was proof I could succeed on my own. Every employee I hired was someone I was helping build a career. Every dollar I earned went toward creating stability Zoe would benefit from. The wedding video still existed online, still had millions of views. But now when people searched my name, the Business Weekly article came up first. Then news stories about the fraud conviction. Then Rivera Solutions' website with testimonials from satisfied clients. The narrative had changed. I wasn't the desperate ex-wife anymore. I was the brilliant analyst who'd uncovered fraud, fought back against a criminal, and built a successful business while raising a child alone. That was the story I wanted Zoe to know. That was the legacy I was building. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and new opportunities. Rivera Solutions had been in business for a year and a half, growing steadily from my solo venture into a legitimate firm with 8 employees and expanding client base. The VC meeting went better than expected. They offered $300,000 in investment capital in exchange for 15% equity. I negotiated. Not because I was greedy, but because I'd learned something crucial over the past 2 years. I was worth more than people's initial offers. Derek had spent years undervaluing my contributions. I wouldn't make that mistake again. We settled on $400,000 for 12% equity. The capital would fund expansion into 2 new markets, development of proprietary software, and hiring 3 more senior analysts. Rivera Solutions was becoming the company I'd always imagined Rivera Analytics could be, if Derek had been honest. Zoe was 9 months old and absolutely fearless. She'd started crawling, which meant my apartment needed serious baby-proofing. She'd also started babbling mama and dada, which broke my heart a little. I was her mama, present and devoted. But her dada was in federal prison, absent by his own choices. I'd thought carefully about what to tell Zoe about Derek as she got older. She'd ask eventually, all children of divorced parents did. I'd decided on honesty appropriate to her age. When she was young, I'd say her father made bad choices and couldn't be in her life. As she got older, I'd explain more. I'd never badmouth Derek to her, but I wouldn't lie either. She deserved truth. The one thing I was certain about, Zoe would know she was loved and wanted. Derek's absence wouldn't define her childhood. My presence would. The Business Weekly article had unexpected benefits beyond new clients. I started getting invited to speak at business conferences and women's entrepreneurship events. The first few invitations I declined. I wasn't comfortable with public speaking, and the idea of sharing my story in front of hundreds of people made my stomach hurt. But Andrea convinced me to accept one invitation. You have something valuable to share, she said. Not just about fraud or divorce, but about building a business with integrity. About turning betrayal into opportunity. People need to hear that. The conference was in Chicago, a 3-day event focused on women in finance. My panel was titled Rebuilding After Betrayal, Business Lessons from Personal Challenges. I'd have 20 minutes to speak, then participate in a moderated discussion with other panelists. I prepared for weeks, writing and rewriting my talk, practicing in front of Andrea and my team, timing everything precisely. I decided to bring Zoe. This trip was part of her story too. The conference center was enormous, the ballroom packed with hundreds of women in business attire. I stood backstage with Zoe on my hip, suddenly questioning everything. What did I have to tell these successful women? Who was I to give advice? Then Zoe grabbed my face and laughed, and I remembered, I'd built a company from scratch while pregnant and dealing with a criminal investigation. I'd survived public humiliation and come out stronger. I'd recovered over $1 million from a man who'd tried to destroy me. I absolutely had something worth sharing. My talk focused on practical lessons. Document everything, trust your instincts, Don't undervalue yourself, build support networks, separate emotion from strategy. I talked about the wedding incident only briefly, focusing instead on the business decisions I'd made afterward. When someone tries to humiliate you into silence, I told the audience, they're usually hiding something they don't want you to discover. That humiliation is a weapon designed to make you too emotional to think clearly. Don't give them that power. Get angry if you need to. Anger can be fuel, but channel it into strategic action, not reactive chaos. The room was silent, every face focused on me. I saw heads nodding, people taking notes. I built Rivera Solutions not because I wanted revenge, I continued. I built it because I'm genuinely good at financial analysis. My ex-husband spent years taking credit for work I did. When that relationship ended, I had a choice. Let him keep defining my worth or prove my value independently. I chose independence. And yes, it was hard. Yes, I had moments of doubt. But every client who chose my new firm over his validated that I'd made the right choice. The applause when I finished was thunderous. During the panel discussion, other entrepreneurs shared their stories of rebuilding after business failures, partnership betrayals, and financial setbacks. We all had different details but similar themes: resilience, strategic thinking, refusing to accept other people's definitions of our worth. After the panel, dozens of women approached me. Some wanted business advice. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Many just wanted to say thank you for being honest about the struggle. One woman, a CEO of a mid-sized tech company, handed me her card. I have a consulting project that needs someone with your analytical skills and your understanding of navigating complex situations. Call me when you're back in the office. That project turned into a 6-month contract worth $200,000. My decision to speak at one conference led directly to Rivera Solutions' biggest contract to date. I learned something important that weekend. My story wasn't a liability. It was an asset. It showed potential clients that I could handle pressure, solve complex problems, and maintain professionalism even in terrible circumstances. Those were exactly the qualities companies needed in a consultant. When I returned home, I accepted 3 more speaking invitations. Each one led to new business opportunities, new connections, new possibilities. Derek's early parole hearing happened in June. Patricia attended on my behalf to provide a victim impact statement opposing his release. Derek Russo has served less than a year of his 7-year sentence, Patricia told the parole board. He has made no meaningful attempts at restitution, despite owing Ms. Rivera over $1 million. His behavior in prison has been acceptable, but that's the bare minimum, not evidence of rehabilitation. Releasing him early would send a message that white-collar crime has minimal consequences. The parole board denied his request. Derek would serve at least 3 more years before being eligible again. I felt nothing when Patricia told me. No satisfaction, no vindication, nothing. Derek was becoming irrelevant to my life. His imprisonment or release barely mattered anymore because I'd built something that had nothing to do with him. That realization felt like freedom. Rivera Solutions celebrated its 2nd anniversary in July. We'd grown to 11 employees, had 15 active clients, and projected revenue of $1.2 million for the year. I'd repaid the business loan that started everything. I'd moved from my apartment into a small house with a I laughed. It felt good to be with someone who understood that competence and uncertainty could coexist. Derek had always needed to project absolute confidence, even when he was wrong. Julian was comfortable admitting when he didn't know something. That difference mattered more than I'd expected. By fall, Rivera Solutions had 13 employees across 2 offices, annual revenue projecting at $1.5 million, and a reputation as one of the best financial consulting firms in the region. I'd been asked to serve on the board of a nonprofit supporting women entrepreneurs. I'd been nominated for a Business Leadership Award. These achievements felt real in a way my work at Rivera Analytics never had. Because this time, I wasn't sharing credit with someone who was stealing. This time, every success was genuinely mine, earned through skill, hard work, and integrity. Derek's next parole hearing wasn't for 2 more years. By then, Zoe would be 3 years old, Rivera Solutions would likely have expanded into additional markets, and I'd have built an even stronger foundation for our future. By then, Derek would be even less relevant to our story than he already was. Because the best revenge wasn't his imprisonment, though justice mattered. The best revenge was building a life so full and successful that his absence became irrelevant. And that's exactly what I'd done. Zoe turned 18 months old on a crisp October morning. She was fully walking now, even attempting to run, which meant I spent most of my time chasing her. She developed strong opinions about everything: which shoes to wear, which foods to eat, which books to read before bed. She was stubborn, smart, and absolutely fearless. "She gets that from you," Andrea said one evening, watching Zoe climb onto furniture she definitely shouldn't be climbing. "The fearlessness or the stubbornness?" I asked. "Both." Rivera Solutions had officially opened 3 offices, the original location, Dallas, and now Seattle. 15 employees total, with plans to hire 5 more by year's end. Revenue projections for the second year hit $2.1 million. The VC investment had paid off dramatically, and the board was discussing additional expansion opportunities. I'd promoted 2 employees to partner positions, sharing ownership and decision-making. It felt right to build something collaborative rather than hierarchical. I'd learned from Derek's mistakes. When you hoard power and take all the credit, you build resentment. When you share success, you build loyalty. The national retail contract had been so successful that they'd referred us to 2 other major companies. Rivera Solutions was becoming known for specific expertise: identifying fraud in complex financial systems, optimizing investment strategies for sustainable growth, and providing analysis that combined technical accuracy with practical business recommendations. My personal life had evolved too. Julian and I had been seeing each other for nearly a year. We'd taken things slowly, carefully integrating him into Zoe's life without rushing. By now she adored him. She called him Juju because pronouncing Julian was still too difficult, and he loved it. Julian had his own successful architecture firm, which meant he understood the demands of running a business. We could talk about growth strategies, employee management, and work-life balance challenges without either of us feeling competitive or threatened. We supported each other's careers instead of competing. One evening in November, after we'd put Zoe to bed together, Julian sat me down on the couch with a serious expression. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever came from that phrase. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, everything is right. But I need to know something before I..." He paused, looking nervous. "Naomi, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for months. And I love Zoe too. I love the life we're building together. But I need to know if you feel the same way, or if I'm just a safe option while you're still healing from what Derek did." The question was fair. Was I in love with Julian, or was I just grateful for stability after chaos? I thought about the past year. About how Julian made me laugh, how he supported my business without trying to control it, how he was patient with Zoe's tantrums and celebrated her milestones like they were his own. How he respected my need for independence while also being reliably present. "I'm in love with you," I said, and knew it was true. "You're not a safe option. You're a genuine partner. The kind I didn't know existed before I met you." Julian's relief was visible. "Good. Because I want to marry you." "Not now. I know you need time, and Zoe needs more stability before big changes. But eventually. I want us to be a family officially, not just in practice." "Eventually," I agreed. "After Derek's situation is more resolved. After Zoe is old enough to understand what marriage means. After we've built something so solid that neither of us has doubts." "That sounds perfect," Julian said and kissed me. We didn't tell Zoe about the future marriage discussion. She was too young to understand. But we did start intentionally building toward that future. Julian spent more nights at our house. We talked about moving in together in the spring. We discussed how we'd blend our lives practically. His architecture firm was successful but smaller than Rivera Solutions, so should he move his office closer to mine? How would we handle finances? What kind of house would work for all of us? These conversations were nothing like my marriage to Derek. With Derek, everything had been rushed and emotionally intense. We'd gotten engaged after 6 months, married after a year, started a business together immediately. Every decision had been impulsive, driven by passion and optimism without enough practical planning. With Julian, we were intentional. We discussed potential problems before they became real issues. We made plans that could be adjusted if circumstances changed. We built slowly and carefully because we both understood that solid foundations required time and thought. Patricia called in December with news about Derek. He'd filed for early parole again despite being denied previously. This time, he'd included letters from a prison counselor and chaplain claiming he'd undergone significant rehabilitation. "The parole board is taking it more seriously this time," Patricia warned. "He's been a model prisoner for over 2 years now. He's completed addiction counseling. Apparently he convinced them he had a gambling problem that led to the fraud. He's participated in financial literacy programs. On paper, he looks rehabilitated. Do you believe he is? I asked. Patricia was quiet for a moment. I believe he's learned how to present himself as rehabilitated. Whether that's genuine or just strategic behavior to get early release, I can't say. But either way, they might grant parole. The hearing was scheduled for January. I'd have to provide another victim impact statement, this time in person at the prison facility where Derek was housed. The thought of seeing Derek face to face after 2 years made my stomach hurt. I'd successfully compartmentalized him as an abstract concept. The man who'd hurt me, the father of my child, the criminal serving time. Seeing him as a real person again felt dangerous, like it might break down walls I'd carefully constructed. But I had to do it. My statement could influence the parole board's decision. I prepared for weeks, writing and revising what I'd say. Patricia helped me strike the right balance. I needed to be honest about the harm Derek had caused without seeming vindictive. I needed to acknowledge his potential for change while emphasizing that true rehabilitation required more than just following prison rules. The prison was 2 hours away, a sprawling facility surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Patricia drove, grateful that she was handling the logistics. Zoe stayed with Julian, protected from this part of her origin story. The hearing room was small and sterile. Derek sat at a table with his attorney, wearing prison khakis and looking thinner than I remembered. Our eyes met briefly. I saw, what? Regret? Calculation? It was impossible to tell. The parole board consisted of 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, all middle-aged and professionally neutral. They reviewed Derek's file, asked him questions about his rehabilitation efforts, listened to his carefully prepared responses about taking responsibility and learning from mistakes. Then it was my turn. Derek Russo stole from me for 2 years. I began, keeping my voice steady. He stole money, yes, over $650,000. But he also stole my trust, my professional reputation, and my sense of safety. When I discovered his crimes, instead of taking accountability, he tried to destroy me publicly. He ripped my dress at his wedding while I was 7 months pregnant with his daughter. He posted that video online to humiliate me. He attempted to paint me as unstable so I wouldn't pursue legal action. Derek stared at the table, his jaw tight. I've spent 2 years rebuilding what he destroyed. I've built a successful business. I'm raising our daughter alone because Derek lost his parental rights through his own choices. I've learned to trust again, though it didn't come easily. In some ways, I've benefited from Derek's absence. I've discovered strengths I didn't know I had. But that doesn't mean he should be released early. I looked directly at the parole board members. Derek was sentenced to 7 years. He served less than half of that. If you release him now, you're sending a message that white-collar crime has minimal consequences. That if you follow the rules in prison and say the right things, you can get away with stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't believe Derek has been rehabilitated. I believe he's learned how to appear rehabilitated. Those are very different things. I sat down, heart pounding. Patricia gave my hand a quick squeeze. Derek's attorney stood and argued for his release. His client had completed every program available, maintained good behavior, expressed genuine remorse. Derek himself gave a statement about understanding the harm he'd caused and wanting to make amends. The parole board deliberated for 30 minutes. When they returned, the chairwoman spoke clearly. Mr. Russo, your behavior in prison has been exemplary, and we acknowledge your participation in rehabilitation programs. However, the severity of your crimes and the pattern of deceptive behavior leading up to your conviction give us significant concern. Additionally, you've made no meaningful progress toward the financial restitution you owe Ms. Rivera. Parole is denied. You'll be eligible for another hearing in 2 years. Relief flooded through me. 2 more years. By then, Zoe would be nearly 4 years old. Rivera Solutions would be even more established. Derek would have less power to disrupt the life I'd built. On the drive home, Patricia asked, "How do you feel?" "Tired," I admitted. Seeing him was harder than I expected. Not because I still care about him, but because it brought back memories of who I used to be. The woman who trusted him, who didn't see the warning signs, who let him convince her she was overreacting. That woman wasn't stupid, Patricia said firmly. She was trusting. Trust isn't weakness. Derek exploited something good in you, your tendency to believe the best in people. He's the one who should be ashamed, not you. I knew she was right, but old shame died hard. When I got home, Julian was on the floor playing blocks with Zoe. She squealed when she saw me and ran over, wrapping her small arms around my legs. "Mama, Juju made a tower." "Made a tower," I corrected automatically, scooping her up. She smelled like baby shampoo and strawberries. Did you have fun? So much fun. She wriggled down and ran back to her blocks. Julian stood and pulled me into a hug. How was it? Parole denied. 2 more years minimum. Good. He kissed the top of my head. Are you okay? I will be. I just need to remind myself that Derek is part of the past and this. I gestured around at our life, at Zoe building her tower, at the home we were creating together. This is the present and future. Speaking of future, Julian said, pulling back to look at me. I know we said we'd wait to talk about this until things were more settled. But I've been thinking, maybe we don't need to wait. Maybe the right time is just whenever we decide we're ready. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple platinum ring with a single diamond. Naomi Rivera, will you marry me? Not because I'm trying to rush you and not because I think you need rescuing. But because I love you, I love Zoe, and I want to build the rest of my life with both of you. Zoe looked up from her blocks. Mama? Why crying? Happy tears, baby, I said, laughing and crying at the same time. These are very happy tears. I looked at Julian, at this good man who'd seen me at my messiest and loved me anyway. Who respected my independence while also being genuinely present. Who loved my daughter like she was his own. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. Julian slipped the ring on my finger while Zoe clapped, not fully understanding but sensing the joy in the moment. That night, after Zoe was asleep and we were cuddled on the couch, Julian asked, "What do you want for our wedding?" Something small, I said immediately. Family and close friends only. No big spectacle. Just us celebrating love without drama. Perfect, Julian agreed. Because that's exactly who we are. 2 people who've learned that real love is in the quiet moments, not the grand gestures. I thought about Derek's wedding, the massive venue, the 200 guests, the elaborate performance that ended with him tearing my dress. All of that spectacle had been hiding the rot underneath. My wedding to Julian would be different. Simple, honest, focused on building something real rather than impressing others. When? I asked. Whenever you're ready. Spring? Summer? Spring, I decided. Small ceremony, maybe in Andrea's backyard. Just the people who matter most. We started planning immediately, not obsessively but thoughtfully. A ceremony in late April when the weather would be perfect. A small reception. Zoe as our flower girl. Simple vows that reflected who we actually were as people. I posted a single photo to social media. My hand with the ring holding Zoe's small hand with Julian's hand covering both of ours. The caption was simple. Building something beautiful with my favorite people. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Former clients congratulated me. Business contacts sent well wishes. My employees were thrilled. Even a few people who'd watched the viral video years ago commented with support. The contrast was striking. Derek's wedding had been designed to humiliate me. My engagement to Julian was genuine joy that people wanted to celebrate rather than judge. Rivera Solutions continued thriving. The expansion into Seattle was successful, and we were exploring opportunities in 2 more cities. My role had shifted from doing all the analytical work myself to managing a team of talented analysts. I was becoming a CEO in truth, not just title. The speaking engagements continued. I'd become known in business circles as someone who could talk authentically about overcoming professional setbacks and building sustainable success. Organizations paid good money for my insights. All of this, the business, the engagement, the stability, was built on the foundation of what Derek had tried to destroy. His cruelty had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking me, he'd forged me into something stronger. One evening, helping Zoe get ready for bed, she asked a question I'd been dreading. Mama, why don't I have a daddy? She was almost 2 now, old enough to notice that other kids had fathers while she only had me and Julian. I chose my words carefully. You do have a daddy. His name is Derek. But he made some bad choices and now he can't be with us. But you have me and you have Julian who loves you very much, and you have lots of people who care about you. Where is Daddy Derek? Far away. But that's okay because we have each other. Zoe considered this, then nodded. Okay. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby girl. So much. She'd have more questions as she got older. I'd answer them honestly and age appropriately. But for now this was enough. I tucked her into bed and watched her fall asleep, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. She had no idea how close she'd come to growing up in a toxic household. No idea that her father's absence was a gift, not a tragedy. But she'd know eventually. When she was old enough, I'd tell her the whole story, not to poison her against Derek, but to show her that sometimes the people who hurt us the most also give us the motivation to become our best selves. Derek had tried to make me nothing. Instead, he'd forced me to prove I was everything. And I'd spend the rest of my life showing Zoe that she could be everything too. 2 years flew by faster than I could have imagined. Zoe turned 3, then started preschool. She was brilliant, curious, and absurdly confident for someone so small. She told anyone who would listen that her mama ran a big company and her juju built beautiful buildings and she was going to be a scientist princess when she grew up. A scientist princess? Julian asked one morning, braiding her hair before school. Yes. Because I can be both, Zoe said matter-of-factly. Julian caught my eye and smiled. She's got a point. Rivera Solutions celebrated its 4th anniversary, having expanded into 5 cities with 32 employees. Annual revenue hit $4.7 million. We'd become one of the top financial consulting firms in the region, known for exceptional analysis and ethical business practices. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had tried to build Rivera Analytics through fraud and ended up destroying it. I'd built Rivera Solutions on integrity and created something genuinely valuable. My wedding to Julian had been perfect. Small ceremony in Andrea's backyard, 40 guests, simple vows that made everyone cry including us. Zoe had been an enthusiastic flower girl who'd thrown petals everywhere with dramatic flair. We'd honeymooned in Vermont, just the 3 of us, staying in a cabin and hiking through mountains. It felt nothing like my first marriage. This time, I'd chosen someone who valued me as an equal partner, who supported my ambitions without trying to control them, who was secure enough in himself that my success didn't threaten him. Derek's most recent parole hearing had been 6 months ago. He'd been denied again. Still minimal progress on restitution, still questions about genuine rehabilitation versus strategic behavior. The parole board told him he'd need to wait another 3 years before being eligible again. That meant Derek would serve his full 7-year sentence, possibly longer. By the time he was released, Zoe would be 6 years old. She'd have grown up knowing Julian as her primary father figure, knowing stability and love without the chaos Derek would have brought. I'd stopped thinking about Derek regularly. He'd become an abstract fact of my past rather than an active presence in my thoughts. The wedding video occasionally resurfaced on social media. People still watched it, still commented, but now most comments were supportive. They praised my resilience, criticized Derek's cruelty, and pointed to my business success as proof that good things happen to people who refuse to stay broken. Business Weekly ran a follow-up article about me, this one focusing on Rivera Solutions expansion and my marriage to Julian. The headline, 5 years after viral humiliation, Naomi Rivera built a $4.7 million business empire. The article featured photos of me at work, at home with Julian and Zoe, speaking at conferences, collaborating with my team. That article led to more opportunities. A major publisher reached out about writing a book, not about Derek or the fraud, but about building ethical businesses that scale sustainably. 3 universities invited me to guest lecture in their business programs. A national news show wanted to profile Rivera Solutions as an example of successful women-owned enterprises. I accepted the book deal and the university lectures. I declined the news profile. I'd learned that some exposure was valuable, but too much made you a target for people who resented success. One afternoon in my office, reviewing financial projections for the next quarter, my assistant knocked on the door. Naomi? There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Who is it? Brittany Russo. Well, former Russo. She says you know her. I hadn't seen or thought about Brittany in 3 years. After she'd cooperated with the investigation and publicly apologized, we'd had no contact. I'd appreciated her apology but had no desire to develop a relationship with the woman who'd helped Derek humiliate me. But curiosity won. Send her in. Brittany looked different, older, humbler. She wore business casual clothing and minimal makeup, nothing like the overdone style she'd had during her brief marriage to Derek. Thank you for seeing me, she said, sitting across from my desk. I know I don't deserve your time. What do you want, Brittany? I wanted to apologize again in person this time. What Derek and I did at the wedding was unforgivable. I've spent years in therapy working through why I participated in that cruelty, why I believed Derek's lies about you, why I thought destroying someone else would somehow make me feel better about myself. I waited, not making this easy for her. I also wanted you to know that I've been following your success. Rivera Solutions is incredible. You built something amazing after we tried to destroy you. That takes a strength I don't have. You had the strength to leave Derek and testify against him, I pointed out. That wasn't easy. It was self-preservation, Brittany said. You did something harder, you built something new instead of just escaping something bad. There's a difference. She was right about that. Why are you really here? I asked. Brittany took a breath. I'm starting my own business, event planning. I know it's presumptuous, but I wondered if you might have any advice. You're one of the few successful entrepreneurs I actually know, and I trust your judgment more than anyone else's because you've proven you can build something ethical. The request was unexpected. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, that I owed her nothing. But another part, the part that had spent 4 years learning to turn negatives into opportunities, saw something different. What kind of event planning? I asked. Corporate events. I have experience in large-scale planning and I'm good at logistics. I want to focus on sustainable events, minimal waste, local vendors, ethical sourcing. I've been working for a planning company for 2 years to learn the industry, and now I'm ready to go solo. Why the focus on sustainability? I asked, genuinely curious. Because I spent too much of my life caring only about appearances, how things looked, what people thought. I want to build something with actual values behind it, not just pretty facades. I studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine, but Derek had seemed genuine too until he wasn't. Here's what I'll tell you, I said finally. Starting a business is hard. You'll doubt yourself constantly, especially in the first year. You'll have moments where you question everything. The key is separating emotion from strategy. You can feel your feelings, but you can't let them dictate business decisions. Document everything. Build systems that protect you. Never compromise your ethics for short-term profit, because long-term reputation is worth more than any single deal. Brittany took notes while I talked. I gave her 20 minutes of advice, practical things I'd learned through trial and error. I didn't sugarcoat the difficulties or promise success. I just told her the truth. When she stood to leave, she extended her hand. Thank you, Naomi. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I appreciate it anyway. I shook her hand. Make something good. That's the best apology you can give, not just to me but to yourself. After she left, Julian called asking about dinner plans. How was your day? Interesting, I said. Brittany showed up asking for business advice. Derek's ex-wife? The one from the wedding? Yep. She's starting a company and wanted guidance. Did you help her? I gave her some advice. Not because I forgive everything that happened, but because helping someone build something ethical is always worth the time. That's very evolved of you, Julian said with admiration in his voice. Or very strategic, I countered. If Brittany builds a successful, ethical business, that's one more example of people doing things the right way. The world needs more of that. That night, after Zoe was asleep, Julian and I sat on our back porch with wine and watched stars appear in the darkening sky. Do you ever think about what your life would be like if the wedding incident never happened? Julian asked. Sometimes, I admitted. If Derek hadn't ripped my dress, I might never have investigated the fraud deeply enough to catch him. I might still be trapped in that toxic situation, believing his lies about the business struggles. In a weird way, his cruelty freed me. But you freed yourself, Julian corrected. He created the situation, but you're the one who chose to fight instead of staying broken. He was right. Derek had hurt me, but I'd decided how to respond to that hurt. I could have stayed victimized, stayed bitter, stayed small. Instead, I'd chosen growth. What about you? I asked. Do you ever regret getting involved with someone who has such a complicated history? Julian pulled me closer. Never. Your history made you who you are, strong, ethical, brilliant, resilient. I love you because of those qualities, not in spite of them. And Zoe is amazing because she's being raised by someone who knows how to turn pain into power. The next morning, I got an email from the publisher about my book. They wanted to title it Building While Broken: How to Create Success After Betrayal. I loved it immediately. It captured exactly what I wanted to share, that you don't have to wait until you're fully healed to start building something new. You can build while you're still healing, and sometimes the building itself is what heals you. I spent the next 6 months writing, working with an editor to refine my thoughts and examples. The book wasn't just about my experience with Derek. It covered general principles about ethical business, strategic recovery from setbacks, and building sustainable success. The book launched in September to surprisingly strong reviews. It sold well enough to hit regional bestseller lists. Business schools started assigning chapters. I got invited to speak at conferences specifically about the book's themes. One interview question kept coming up. Do you think you'll ever forgive Derek? My answer evolved over the months. Initially I'd say I didn't know. Then I'd say forgiveness wasn't the point, building something better was. Eventually I settled on, forgiveness is complicated. I've let go of anger because holding on to it was hurting me more than him. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing what he did. It means I'm no longer giving him power over my emotional state. He's irrelevant to my happiness, and that's its own form of freedom. Derek's final parole hearing was scheduled for December, his last chance at early release before completing his full sentence. Patricia attended without me this time. I'd said everything I needed to say at previous hearings. This time, my absence was the statement. I'd moved on so completely that Derek's release date didn't even register as important. The parole board denied him again. Derek would serve his full 7 years plus an additional 6 months for a minor disciplinary incident in prison. He'd be released in June, making Zoe 4 years old. Patricia called with the news. He'll need to comply with strict parole conditions, regular check-ins with a parole officer, continuing restitution payments, no contact with you or Zoe without court approval. If he violates any conditions, he goes back to prison. Does he have a plan for when he's released? I asked. His attorney mentioned something about working for a financial literacy nonprofit. Apparently he's been tutoring other inmates in basic money management. Whether that's genuine rehabilitation or just more performance, time will tell. I hoped, for Zoe's sake, that it was genuine. She deserved a father who'd learned from his mistakes, even if that father would never be part of our daily life. Rivera Solutions celebrated reaching 50 employees and $6 million in annual revenue. We'd become a mid-sized firm with a national reputation. I'd hired a COO to handle daily operations, freeing me to focus on strategy and growth. The American dream, people called it. Single mother builds million-dollar business after divorce. But it wasn't about American dreams or revenge or proving anything to Derek. It was about discovering that I could build something valuable on my own terms, that my worth wasn't defined by others, that survival was possible even after the worst moments. On Zoe's 4th birthday, we threw a party at our house. 15 preschool friends running through the backyard, parents socializing while kids played. Julian manned the grill. Andrea organized games. My employees who'd become friends helped with setup and cleanup. This was family now. Not just blood relations, but the people who showed up, who supported me through hell, who celebrated victories and commiserated through struggles. While we sang happy birthday and Zoe made a wish before blowing out her candles, I thought about how far we'd come. 4 years ago, I'd been standing in a torn dress, humiliated in front of hundreds. Now I was standing in my backyard, surrounded by love, watching my daughter's face light up with joy. That night, tucking Zoe into bed, she asked about her father. Mama, when will I meet Daddy Derek? The question I'd been preparing for but still dreaded. Maybe next year, I said honestly. He's been away learning how to be better. When he comes back, we'll see if he's ready to know you. But even if he's not, you have me and Julian and so many people who love you. I know, Zoe said confidently. I'm lucky. Yes, baby. We both are. After she fell asleep, I went to my home office and looked at the framed Business Weekly cover on the wall. From viral humiliation to CEO. The photo showed me in my office, confident and professional. That woman in the photo was so different from the woman in the torn dress. But they were both me, past and present, connected by a journey of growth and determination. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on everything you've built. I've been following your success from prison. When I'm released, I hope we can have a civil conversation about co-parenting Zoe. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like the chance to be a father, if you'll allow it. Derek. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it and block the number. Part of me wanted to respond with all the anger I'd worked so hard to release. But mostly I felt nothing. Derek was just a person now, not a villain or a victim, just someone who'd made terrible choices and would have to live with consequences. I typed a careful response. Any discussion about Zoe happens through attorneys and the courts. If you're serious about being in her life, prove it through actions, not words. She deserves better than broken promises. I hit send, then turned off my phone. Tomorrow I had a board meeting for Rivera Solutions. Next week I was speaking at a conference in Boston. Next month, Zoe's preschool holiday program. Next year, who knew what opportunities would appear? The future was wide open, filled with possibilities built on the foundation of everything I'd survived. Derek had tried to write my ending with humiliation and destruction. Instead, he'd just written the prologue to a much bigger story, one where I was the author, the protagonist, and the one who controlled how it ended. And it was going to end with success, love, and a daughter who knew her worth from day one. That was the best revenge of all.